What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast. And sorry that Matt is not here yet. He'll be joining me in a few minutes, just in case anyone was wondering there. But today we are going to do episode 40 and discuss a lot of the things that are going on in Mets land between spring training beginning, a couple of injuries that have unfortunately happened, as well as a trade that the New York Mets have made and all that other stuff. Before we jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like on your way into the live stream. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot to get into. This podcast also, I apologize for it being very late, number one, and also being very last minute. We literally decided like 5 minutes ago, which is why Matt's not here yet. But either way, I digress. We have a lot to discuss on this live stream because of the fact that there's actually substance now with the spring training game started. And really, just where do you begin? Because you could go with the injuries to begin. You could go with the good news, though, where Juan Soto, in his first at bat as a New York Met, albeit spring training, hit a home run, which was very exciting. Clay Holmes is shoving so far. But like I said, there's really a lot here that we have to discuss. Also, the Mets did make a signing today that I completely forgot to mention in the opening here. But yeah, there's just a lot to unpack here. So we'll start off with the unfortunate news of Sean Manaea going down. And that's the unfortunate thing about having a rotation with guys that have an injury history, and Manaea is not an exception there. Montas is someone, and it sucks too because we said in the last episode where if one of Manaea or Senga go down now, it was really going to be a problem with the depth of the rotation. And long and behold, we are here. Am I freaking out, panicking, thinking the Mets need to go out and make a move? No, but it is at the same time concerning looking at the rotation, all things considered. I'm also not freaking out because of the fact that, in terms of what the injury is, it is an oblique strain. And he made it sound like, and he told us that it could be 7 days to 21 days. So 1 to 3 weeks before he starts throwing a baseball again. And that's just throwing a baseball. Obviously, he's going to need time to ramp up. So you figure the timeline would probably be the middle of April, maybe the end of April, early May for him to return, which isn't the worst thing considering the fact that if you look at the schedule, there are a couple of off days early on in the season where the Mets could utilize a 5-man rotation versus the 6-man rotation that they were going to go with because of those built-in off days acting like, an extra day off for these starting pitchers. Because as of right now, if you look at the rotation, very it's very concerning. And a lot of people had questions going into it, as is. I was worried a little bit, but I was not as worried as most Met fans were going into the season with this rotation. But in terms of what you look at now with the injury, it is Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, and then a lot of question marks. Is it Paul Blackburn? Is it Griffin Canning? Is it Brandon Sproat who's going to get a shot? As we do have Matt joining in. But yeah, I'll let you jump in right away. First of all, how you doing? Second of all, we're talking about the Manaea injury, and just if you want to give your thoughts on that in terms of where the rotation stands and everything.
Oh, first of all, I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. But yeah, look, the Manaea injury. Listen, I'm gonna be flat out honest. Like, it sucks, but I look at it this way: it could have been a lot worse, right? And I think when we talk about Manaea, and we go back to last year, and when he really made that adjustment of switching up his arm slot after that series against the Braves, and he pretty much took off from there. But I think the one thing you really worried about with Manaea after that was because you're switching your arm slot, and you're switching up the way you've been throwing for years, and you get comfortable, and we already talk about pitching in general as not a natural thing for the body, but all of a sudden when you switch up your arm slot, that could be very dangerous, on your arm, and it could cause a ton of arm injuries later down the line in your career. So for me, like, listen, it's a lat issue, and any type of injury sucks. But for me, I look at it as at least there's no significant damage on the arm. There's nothing wrong with the elbow. There's nothing wrong with the forearm. So like I said, a lat injury does still suck because even like, and I know pretty much like a couple of the reporters, like Tim Healy specifically said that the Mets expect Sean Manaea back at least around mid-April to late April at the latest. So if that's the case and he comes back around that time, then I'm cool with it. Does it still suck to lose him? Yeah, because you're gonna lose him for at least a couple starts, but it could have been a lot worse. And like I mentioned, Syndergaard did have a lat injury at the start of the 2017 season that did keep him out like pretty much I think majority of the year. I think he came back around like August or something like that, if I remember correctly. But yeah, at least the one thing for me, like that I like with the Mets, at least for this year, and they were doing it last year. Like in terms of Mendoza, when there's an injury, Mendoza's like pretty much honest with you. Like he's not gonna beat around the bush. He's not gonna bullshit you. He's gonna be straightforward. Did the same thing with Frankie Montas. Said that it wasn't good and he's gonna be out for a while. But with Manaea, you said yeah he does have some soreness, but it shouldn't be too bad, and they expect them, like I said, around mid-April to late April. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
By the way, was it lat or oblique? Because I said oblique before, and I could
It
be
was a
wrong
it
there.
was a lot.
Lat. Okay, so I
Yeah.
I had that mixed up there. Um. So yeah. Which again, like we said in the last episode, talking about the Montas injury, it really is a weird spot with this rotation because the depth is already getting tested, and it's not something fans are going to want to hear, but they're not bringing back Jose Quintana. They're not going to get Spencer Turnbull. What they have is what they have. And I think that come opening day, you're looking at the rotation being you're looking at it being Senga, Peterson, Holmes, and then if Blackburn's ready, he'll be there. Canning, and then McGill, maybe Jose Urena, who they just signed today, gets a start, which we'll talk more about that later on. Or maybe Sproat gets a chance. Maybe Kranick, who has looked good in spring, which we'll talk about him as well later on, potentially gets a start. But I was talking about before you joined in, the only way I could spin this positively is that there are the off days because looking right now, early in the season, they have an off day after their set in Houston. They have an off day after the Miami series. They have an off day after their 6-game homestand, which that is where you look at the first time and say, all right, maybe they're going to need to go with a 6-man rotation, but maybe you avoid it early on and you just stick with a 5-man rotation. Then this is where you have the challenge where there is no off days from when they go to Oakland up until the next Thursday after their road trip with Oakland or sorry, the A's and the Twins, and then they come back home to play the Cardinals and Phillies, and then that's their next off day. So maybe they're gonna go with the 6-man rotation the entire time, but I think maybe they could work their way around it a little bit with a 5-man rotation. But it just really sucks to be here because we both also said that he should get the ball on opening day. So yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts in terms of further with the depth or anything, or like the 5-man, 6-man rotation thing.
Well, I think for me, and I'll add on to this for the point of also another point of Manaea. I think it's also a positive that, and I think they weren't going to rush out either way to get a starting pitcher because I think Stearns and everyone in the front office believes in the pitching depth that they did acquire throughout the offseason. But for me, I view it as a good sign that they're not panicking right now, even though Manaea's out. Because I think if Manaea went out for a long time and this was like if he had to get Tommy John surgery or he was going to be out to like August or something, I think at that point there would have been a little bit more caution, and there would have been, I think, a little bit more emphasis on the front foot to go get a starting pitcher. I mean, I know, like you mentioned, Quintana's out there, Turnbull's out there. Um, the Cardinals recently, in the last couple of days, have talked about that they might be interested in trading away Eric Fetty, which is someone that the Mets were interested in getting, at the deadline and even in free agency last year, but they lost out to the White Sox. But yeah, to me at least, the fact that they're not rushing out and getting a starting pitcher, that at least I'm a bit more confident on that Manaea's going to be back here sooner rather than later. But yeah, listen, the depth will be tested. And I think, we're going to talk about this more in the episode, but it was nice to see Clay Holmes go out there in his first two spring training starts and pitch 6 really good innings. I think he only gave up 1 hit, no walks, no earned runs either. So that's really nice to see. He's really, making a couple nice adjustments into that starter role. Like you mentioned, Kranick, he's been really good in spring training so far. And overall, I mean, the pitching has been pretty good. I mean, other than like Blake Tidwell, not a lot of the Mets pitchers, at least, and I know like it's spring training, so you're not facing the top guys. Sometimes you're facing a lot of these minor leaguers, sometimes you face the top guys, but pretty much like I said, aside from Tidwell, the Mets pitching so far in spring training has looked pretty good. So that's at least intriguing for me because I think when we talk about the Mets over the last decade, when the Wilpons were still here, when we had guys like Brody Van Wagenen as the GM and even Sandy Olson a couple times, like the pitching depth overall was just poor. And it's like every time you lose like one starter, even if it was a back end starter, you'd be like, fuck, who the fuck are we going to now? And
Here's
then,
Corey Oswalt.
yeah, and then we sign guys like, Wilmer Font and bring up Chris Flexen to pitch and Corey Oswald, guys like that. And Rafael Montero, you have to go watch out on the mound. But at least,
Robert Stock.
yeah, those guys. But at least like Paul Blackburn stuff, like he's not the best pitcher out there, but at least as a 5 guy, 6 guy, or possibly you have to be a 4 guy, to start the season right now with Manaea and the Montas injury. But at least that's a guy you look at and say, okay, not the greatest, but if I have to rely on him like for a week or two to be the fourth starter, I could get away with it. And again, this is why like the offense is going to be key to this season because you bring in Soto, you bring back Pete, you know, you hope for a Nimmo bounce back. You hope for some sort of repeat from Lindor. I'm not saying he's going to put up the exact same numbers as last year because that was just an MVP season from him and a career year from him. But if you could put up something similar to that, like you do desperately need that. But the Mets so far, and then additionally with the bullpen, and we do like a couple of the additions that David Stearns made in the bullpen, but the Mets are going to have to hit. They're going to have to score runs to win games, and that's going to be the key. And then we'll see how the rotation works out, but I I do feel confident that this rotation could at least get to the deadline, and then once the deadline hits, then we could go out there and make that big time starting pitcher addition.
Yeah, like the thing, people are just freaking out too much. Like, need I remind everyone what this rotation looked like on opening day last year? Because we had Manaea, which that was before he changed his arm slot too, and he wasn't terrible out of the gate, but he wasn't what he was in that second half last year. Luis Severino, who there was uncertainty with, Jose Quintana, who need I remind everyone was complete garbage in the first half. And then you had Adrian Hauser, which was pretty much punting every fifth day. And you had Tyler McGill out there as well, making starts. You had Jose Budo making starts at one point. So, as much as everyone's up in arms and in question about the rotation, they're in, I would argue, a similar spot as last year where there's a lot of uncertainty. Your one certainty could get injured in Kodai Senga because he's the guy that I trust the most out of the rotation. But I think everyone's up in arms too much over this. I get being skeptical about the rotation. Like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm not, but I think that it's a little insane the way people are reacting because at the end of the day, this is what I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this, but this is where Stearns thrives. This is where the Mets are gonna hopefully show us, and this will be a huge test to prove to all the fans that the pitching lab is legit that they're developing here, and and I get it that we're used to saying things like we are so cursed and everything, but maybe that is true, but at the end of the day, I'm not overly concerned because of the fact that last year the depth was tested early. They had virtually 2 punt days in the rotation last year, and they still made the playoffs. Oh, but the Dodgers spent money and look at their rotation. Well, look at what their rotation was last year down the stretch, especially in the playoffs. They relied on 3 or 4 starting pitchers down the stretch. So, again, I'm not understanding where this, like, why everyone's ready to jump off the ship here over Sean Manaea being out for a couple of weeks and over Frankie Montas being hurt here, which again, I get having questions with the depth, but this is what Stearns is here for. And I know people that don't like Stearns aren't going to want to hear this and say, he's a dollar store Dave or whatever. But this is what he was brought here for, to bring his pitching, the pitching lab here. And I just wanted to read this comment before I let you jump in, but would need to move a contract out, i.e., Marte to take a starting pitcher contract on to not get killed with the luxury tax. Yeah, which that's another thing that we're going to get into a little bit later, because a certain name popped up on the DFA list today that caught my eye that I would love if they could grab and then move Marte, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
No, yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. Like, I mean, like going back to that comment, we're cursed. Like, there's no such thing as curses in sports. It's whether you're just a functional franchise or a dysfunctional franchise. And the Mets used to be a dysfunctional franchise. Now we hope that's turning around, and I think that's turning around because we finally got the owner Steve Cohen, who's throwing out the big bucks, and we have the young, you know, not even up and coming. He's already established himself, but one of the best young minds in baseball, David Stearns, and this is just like we said, this is what he was brought here to do because you apply and you combine the money power of Steve Cohen with the smarts of David Stearns. And again, this is why, we've mentioned this before. Carton's mentioned this before on Mets Weekly. Make sure you guys go check that out. It's just now in modern baseball, you don't spend a lot of money on the rotation. You don't spend a lot of money on big time starting pitchers. And look, is it nice to have that big time ace go out there, every 5 days, every 6 days, depending who you are? Listen, back when DeGrom was here, like it was an event every time DeGrom was on the mound because every time you expected that he went out there, you expected greatness. And I mean, the first half of that 2021 season, 2020, 2019, 2018, it was just incredible to watch. But injuries did catch up to him. And listen, at the time, maybe people were upset that he left. I was certainly disappointed that DeGrom left. But looking at that contract, you'd say, yeah, you understand it because the injuries and stuff. And it's just and the Mets were right to not give him that contract. So listen, like I said, it's nice to go out there and have that, that big time rotation. Like similarly, like you look at the Yankees, right? And you have Garrett Cole out there, you have Luis Hill, you have Max Fried they picked up, Carlos Rodon. It's a nice rotation, but again, one or two injuries, and what's different about the Yankees is they have a lot of big time money locked into that rotation. So if you really get 1, 2 injuries in that rotation, it could really hamper you. At least now with the Mets, sure, like Manaea makes $25 million a year, and some of that's even deferred anyway. But it's not a huge big time loss in terms of money wise where it's going to hamper you. And like I said, as of right now, he's not going to be out long term. So as of right now, we're good on that front. But yeah, and similar like the point like you brought up with the Dodgers, like yeah, the Dodgers spent all that money on starting pitching, and look at the rotation last year in the playoffs. You had Yamamoto making starts, you had Walker Buehler making starts, Jack Flaherty making starts, and then that fourth game they were relying on bullpen games. I mean, they threw 2 bullpen games against us, and they threw a bullpen game in the World Series. So just because you have the nice flashy stars out there, it doesn't mean anything because again, the Dodgers they could go out there again and have injuries. Like Tyler Glass now is a ticking time bomb. He great pitcher, deserves the money, but again, he gets hurt. Blake Snell has been reliable throughout his whole career pretty much, but again, injuries could catch up to him. So, and again, and listen, the Dodgers can do it because the amount of money they make and they bring in. But listen, at least me, you, and a lot of a big portion of the fan base who trust David Stearns, we're trusting him because he did the same thing in Milwaukee. He's doing it here. It worked in the first season. He deserved that grace period. We were right to trust him. And listen, like I said, seeing Manaea go down, seeing Montas go down, it sucks, but you gotta trust in the depth. And at least that's what I'm doing for now.
Yeah, and the other thing with the Dodgers, like you brought up the fact that they do bring in more money, which obviously that's, a big factor in all of this. But the other part in all of this as well is the fact that they have the resources to do this. And the reason that I say that, in case you're not understanding what I mean, the difference is they don't have to overpay for depth. They don't have to pay for their debt because it comes from within. The Mets don't have that right now because look at how much Met fans are freaking out by the idea of Brandon Sproat potentially having to come up early. Look at the fact that, we don't trust some of the young guys in the system potentially to get roles like Brett Beatty and some of these other guys. You're not going to be able to spend big on starting pitching until you get to that spot where you have depth guys that could come through the farm that you trust and you could rely on. And I get no one wants to hear it, but that's just what it is. You have to build your way up to that first.
Yeah, and Carson mentioned this before in our group chat. Like, especially, I remember when the Dodgers signed Kirby Yates, and everyone was freaking out. I was like, "Oh, how the Dodgers keep doing this?" And he was right. In order to get up to where the Dodgers are right now, you really have to build from within, and you have to build that what's that farm system, and then you could go out there, and then when you have constant pitchers coming through the ranks, and then position these depth position players coming through the ranks, then that's the time where you can really go out there and then spend on those big time starters or those big time free agents. Because even like the Dodgers, like when Guggenheim first bought them, I mean they did spend money, but they're not spending money to the ability that they are doing now. They had to, build up that farm system, and then once they did, then you started seeing them make all these, crazy trades. When you go through the past few trade deadlines, Manny Machado, they brung in Scherzer and Trey Turner in 2021, and then you see them they trade for Mookie Betts, they extend them, they sign Freddie Freeman, they sign Otani. You
Glass
really have
now.
what?
Glass now.
Yeah, Glass now. They brung in Blake Snell, and they're gonna continue to do this. But a big part of the reason why is because they have that farm system that keeps producing this young talent that they could either bring in as cheap depth, or they could flip them for big time all stars and superstar players. And eventually, it's like I said with the Mets, it's gonna take some time. And we've seen it so far with Brandon Sproat. He's going to come up this year, and hopefully he comes up and pitches well. We have we have a couple of young guys in Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams. They drafted Carson Bench last year. It's going to take some time, but eventually the Mets will get to that point where they're going to have these young guys just pretty much filtering throughout the system and come up and come up, come up. And then, like I said, we could see them come up as cheap depth, or you could reflip them for stars at the trade deadline.
Yeah, that, and it also, like, we saw and heard that a lot of these players that ended up re-signing with the Mets like talked about how they really wanted to be here. Once you show that you are sustainably in that spot where you're winning and you're constantly in contention, guys will gravitate towards that. Like, I'm sure Kirby Yates had other offers similar, if not better, to the Dodgers offer, but he's up there in age and wants to win a ring, probably. Like, that's probably what it comes down to. He wants to try to put himself in the best spot to win. And, guys gravitate towards that, or guys that, need to fix their careers maybe, or, want to tweak themselves. Like, look at when they trade for Michael Kopech, the turnaround that he had. Anthony Bonda, he was complete and utter garbage when he was a New York Met. Goes to the Dodgers, and all of a sudden things change. Guys will want to be in that type of environment. They have to prove that they are sustainably like that. That's the other thing that, ties into this whole conversation here of, well, the Dodgers do it. Why can't we? Because you don't just throw money at guys, then you're the Angels. You're not the Dodgers. Sorry, but you're not. That's just not how this works.
Also, the fact that it's a touchy subject and a sensitive subject right now, but when you look at the deferrals, right, and even for me, like I don't have a problem with deferrals personally. I do think there should definitely be a cap implemented in the next CBA talks. But people complain about, oh, like look at how much money the Dodgers are deferring. The Dodgers have deferred over $1 billion in money on contracts. I mean, that's crazy. But why are players willing to come to the Dodgers and defer money? Because they know that they're a sustainable winner, and they know that when I come here and I sign, I'm going to get playing time, and I'm going to be on a competitive team that has a chance to win a World Series every year. And eventually, I know, Manaea did it this offseason. He deferred some money, but if the Mets every year they're in the playoffs, they're making deep runs, they're going to the NLCS, they're making World Series runs, and every year, they're signing guys, and they're competing for the division every year. Eventually, guys will be willing to do the same thing. They'll be willing to come here and defer money. I mean, we talk about it all the time. And you even look at other sports. With teams like the Bruins, and people have brought up. Why do all these guys? They go to like teams like the Bruins and stuff, and they take cheaper contracts. Well, because teams like that are always in contention to win, and they want to be in a position to win. So yeah, the money's nice, but if they really want to ring that bad, they'll be willing to take a little bit less for the betterment of the team. Same thing with like the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it all depends on just, and like we said, we think that the Mets are finally going in the right direction. It's all about getting in that right direction and then becoming a sustainable winner.
Yeah, and the final point I'll hit on that is the fact that the deferrals are helping the Dodgers so much and allowing them to spend on that starting pitching. Because when you have Shohei Ohtani only accounting for 2 million on the payroll throughout the first 10 years, or the 10 years of that contract, whatever it is, it's easier to go out and sign other guys. And I love Juan Soto, happy he's here, but that's not the structure of his contract. I love Francisco Lindor. That's not the structure of his contract. So when you're in a spot where you don't have that luxury of a Shohei Ohtani only on the books for 2 million with the rest of it deferred, it's harder to say, yeah, go out and spend on starting pitching. The Dodgers are in that spot where they could do that because of that.
Yeah, I also think though that Ohtani deferral thing. I think that's like, I don't think we'll ever see that again, to be honest. I
No.
think it was a perfect scenario where he always wanted to be a Dodger. He wanted to stay in LA. And the fact that, that he's such a big international brand, especially with Japan, like he makes so much money off endorsements and stuff. It's like that he was a bit willing to go out there and say, okay. And even like the fact that, still he signed the 10-year, $700 million contract, and he deferred $680 million of that contract. I mean, that's still crazy. I mean, you'll never see another superstar in baseball or any other sport defer that amount of money. That's a once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah, no. It's just something that's not going to happen. And yeah, the Dodgers are like they're making back the money already from the contract. So it's like, again, it's going to take a bit to get there. And you heard Steve Cohen the other day, who was not happy with the attendance. So if you want the Mets to spend, show up to games too. That'll help. That'll help. And I know that I don't have much room to talk because I didn't go as much as I probably should have last year. Went a decent amount, but still, show up to games, and that would help out a lot. But either way, we'll segue into most of the conversation here with spring training, moving away from the Manaea thing, the Dodgers thing, whatever. In terms of another injury that happened, Nick Madrigal ended up being hurt, which automatically got everyone to think Jose Iglesias is coming back, including myself for a minute. I thought maybe it would happen, but it's not going to. It's probably now. I mean, Luisson Acuna, spot is yours. Brett Beatty, if he keeps playing the way he has this spring, the spot is yours. There's a wide open spot on that bench, though, where hopefully Nick Madrigal is okay, but this is where the young guys have to step up and thrive to win that roster spot, which will be interesting because so far, I mean, out of the young guys, Brett Beatty has had the best spring, which he's become Mr. March here lately, but we'll see. We'll see how it translates, I guess. I don't know. I'm done falling for it though. I hope he thrives. I want to be wrong, but I can't fall for the gimmick anymore.
He thinks he's Mika Zibanejad.
He's still in his
This
month.
is not Mika March, Beatty March. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, listen, for Madrigal, I mean, it sucks for him. He dislocated his shoulder. He's going to be out for a little bit. At least that's what the Mets said. I mean, listen, if I'll be honest, it's not a huge loss because I mean he was brung on. He was brung in here on a split contract, so he wasn't even a guarantee to make the roster. And I mean, yeah, I mean you brought it up, Luis Angel Acuna, Brett Beatty. I mean, if this is your time to want to take a roster spot and on the bench, and I know we brought up, at least on the last podcast, we brought up that you don't want Acuna to come up here and then sit on the bench. You would rather him go down to AAA and really just play every day and keep on developing. But I mean, even when you look at second base right now, I mean, Jeff McNeil has had a one. He's been 1 for 10 so far in spring training, so he's not looking too good right now in spring training. I mean,
Who would
we
have thought?
say that it wasn't pretty much predictable because McNeil has fallen off since his prime days in 2019, 2022, and yeah, still got 2 more years left on that contract at $15 million. So not great, but I mean, listen, if he keeps struggling and Acuna has a strong spring training, I mean, we've seen David Stearns um be ruthless on the pitching side, especially last year. We've seen him get rid of a lot of guys early on the season when they're producing. If Jeff McNeil's not going to produce in spring training, or at least not improve on 1 for 10, I mean, you really have to consider Luis Acuna being the opening day second baseman, and then maybe even Brett Beatty too. I mean, Beatty's not the best defensive player. He's been a little bit better, especially last year. You did see a bit of improvement over there at third base, but yeah, the Beatty thing is interesting because he shows signs. You think, okay, maybe here and there. I mean, he came up in 2022 in Atlanta, his first at bat, hit a home run. You think, oh, maybe this is the next guy at third base to take over, and then you see the slumps. 23, same thing, and it's like, I don't know. For me, listen, I hope Beatty, comes up here if he makes the team and produces, but. And I would like it, especially since I bought the guy's jersey on 2023 home opener. So, I don't want to lose too much money there. But yeah, I'm saying with you, I'm not falling for it until he comes up here and he proves that he could hit major league pitching at a consistent level, and the power's there, and the defense is at least semi reliable. Then I can't fall for it because I've seen it way too many times with him.
Unironically, the defense was actually like solid last year when he was up with the team for that brief stint. But yeah, I just it's like he hit that home run in Atlanta, and Eric Chavez said, "Whoa, there, pulling the ball, not on my watch, kid." But yeah, he needs to. It's what Brian said in the chat that I pulled up before that. I'll believe it when I see him do it versus major league pitching, and that's what it comes down to. And if it's gonna be what it was last year, then I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately. But I hope for for the Mets' sake and his sake that it is different this time around. But yeah, I just can't fall for it. I'm very interested to see how this bench is honestly going to shape out in general, just because Marte might not even be ready for opening day either, which who would have thought there. And in terms of the correlation with that, the Mets made a trade a couple of days ago as they acquire who was the guy they acquired? I just had his
I
name
think
before.
I think it was Canario.
Yes, Alexander
Yeah,
Canario from the Cubs for cash. So small trade there. I believe that he's out of options.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's
out of
out of
options.
options, which is very interesting, which tells us maybe that Marte is not going to be ready come opening day. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. But I'm actually interested with Canario, a 24-year-old who pulls the ball strictly. He hits the ball hard. He's pretty much, I said it the other day in our group chat, he's pretty much just Jose Siri in terms of at the plate because he doesn't play the defense that Jose Siri does. And no offense, but he doesn't have the aura Siri does. But he can hit the ball hard, and that's really about it. And he could draw walks, I guess, more than Siri too.
Yeah, I mean, small sample size, but I mean, at least in the 21 games that he's played in between 23, 24, I mean, he's put up an 857 OPS, a 333 on base, 286 batting average. So, I mean, like I said, small sample size, but I mean, listen, if he comes in here as, a backup outfielder, as a, DH platoon between him and Winker, I mean, sure, it's okay. I mean, it's not like, Marte's like the greatest option in the world either. And considering that, his legs are pretty much gone, he just can't really steal anymore, can't play the outfield. I mean, listen, if he's not ready for opening day and Canario's, the bench guy, the second DH option behind Winker, I'm cool with it. We'll see what happens. And then if he's not producing and Marte comes back, you DH him. I mean, yeah, you DFA him and get rid of him. I mean, it's not really a big thing, but I guess a nice little depth trade.
There is a name though that emerged today, like I hinted at before. Stearns, if you could hear me, I'm begging you, man. When I saw that Stone Garrett got DFA'd earlier, my jaw dropped because if the Mets want to get a guy that would be a great right-handed DH, and if they have a trade that they could make for Marte, maybe if they want the Royals still want him and Hunter Harvey's still available, wouldn't hate that. But I doubt that trade would happen. But if the Mets could move Marte and bring in Stone Garrett, I would love it. I don't care how small of a sample size it is. The guy hits the ball hard, and his numbers against right-handed pitcher or left-handed pitchers rather are really good. They're really good as well. I'm pretty sure I saw on Twitter earlier. I think he has like a 121 WRC plus against left-handed pitchers, and we've talked about before many of times. There with guys like Acuna, especially, there are more, at the end of the day, there are more right handed pitchers than left handed pitchers. Stone Garrett would come in and be in a very reduced role versus Marte, who's making 20 million to play what, once every 4 days, maybe at most. So I would seriously look into acquiring Stone Garrett. I think he's a better option than Canario, who they just acquired. And I'm trying to get his stats right now in terms of how he is against
Yeah,
right-handed pitchers
I got him pulled up. This is against righties, right? You mentioned.
or
Yeah.
lefties, rather.
All
Sorry.
right. Yeah, because I have both up. But yeah, in 2022, he had a 138 WRC plus. In 2023, 123 WRC plus, and then he played 2 games, I think, in 24, and he had a 377 WRC plus. Another 377 is not, realistic, but I mean, 138, 123. I mean, those are pretty good numbers.
Yeah, I have the total numbers up right now against left-handed pitchers. So he has a 133 WRC plus total. He's got an 874 OPS, a 541 slugging, 333 on base, 279 average, and on top of that, he could run the base as well. I'm just throwing it out there. Someone told me to jump off a bridge, not actually, but was like, the last thing we need is more outfielders. I would move Marte in a heartbeat if possible to bring in Stone Garrett because I just can't rationalize still paying 20 plus $1 million for a DH that's going to play once every 4 days at most and still probably get injured in the process. I just cannot rationalize having that on the roster. I'm sorry, but it's not even just about the fact that I want Stone Garrett. I have felt this way this entire time, but now that there's an option right in front of your damn eyes that would be perfect for the role, I'm sorry, but it makes too much sense. And I don't know if I would do this trade just because Montgomery's contract go beyond the season? I could be wrong about that.
No, I think it was just a 2-year deal. It was just a 2-year deal with an option after the first year. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, it would make it a little more intriguing, but either way, I would, if it's possible to move Marte and get Stone Garrett, I would easily do that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just checked. Montgomery's a UFA after this year, so you would just pay for the 1 year, $22.5 million. Which, I mean, look, if you were to move Marte from Montgomery, I mean, we mentioned it before, like earlier on the offseason, when they brought in Holmes and Montas, we didn't really want to bring in Montgomery just because, you don't want to bring in too many projects into your rotation. You wanted a couple more, guys that you could pretty much rely on. But I mean, look, like since Montas is gonna be out for a while, Manaea, we anticipate he's gonna be back around sometime in April. I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing to bring in a guy like Montgomery. I mean, he did show in 2023 that he could be reliable down the stretch, and he was really good in the World Series one with the Texas Rangers. So yeah, and like you said, it's money for money at the end of the day, and I think Montgomery would have a lot more value on this team than Starling Marte because. I mean, and this factors in with Stone Garrett, but like you mentioned with Stone Garrett, he hits the ball hard. He can hit home runs. He can hit the ball far. If Marte and pretty much his role, because he's not going to play a lot of outfield this year. At least I hope not. But the guy can't play. The guy can't play the outfield, and for a guy that's going to be a platoon DH with Jesse Winker, he doesn't hit home runs. His power is he had this was a guy in 2022 that had plenty of home runs with the Mets, but last year, I mean, he didn't hit a home run since June. And we're asking this guy to be our DH against left-handed pitchers. I don't see it. I mean, listen, if there's a way that they can move Marte and they're gonna have to eat some money on it, unless it's a trade with the with the Diamondbacks, but like a trade that was brought up before on Twitter, if they were gonna send him to Kansas City for Hunter Harvey, at that point you would have to eat money on him. But yeah, if the Mets and Stearns could somehow move on from Starling Marte, I would 100% be for it.
Yeah, I just think that like you said with the Montgomery thing, at least you're getting some value out of Montgomery because this team needs obviously the elephant in the room is starting pitching, and they need innings where starting Marte again. Is he going to be healthy? Like that's really the biggest thing here on top of that. And at least Stone Garrett, if I need him to play the field every now and then, I feel a lot more comfortable with him going out and playing the outfield versus Starling Marte, who looked like he couldn't move out there at all last season. So if the option's there, I would do it. Is it realistic? Probably not. But I would love it if it somehow happened. But that's my quick little hard on for Stone. Get it. Pause. Anyway, that wasn't funny. But either way, yeah. In terms of just wrapping up with the bench conversation stuff, I forgot to bring this comment up before that. Yeah, I think that having the kids play multiple positions, getting time, Beatty, Acuna, Mauricio could also see them trying to get McNeil hot and then trade him. That could be possible. I don't know how they're going to get McNeil hot. That's the only issue with all of this. But I, outside of that, if there is a world where that could happen, I'm signing the dotted line right after Carson does. So, yeah, I don't know if that happens, but really the main issue with the whole thing of giving one of like with that last bench spot for the infield, I should say, is if it's Beatty, that's a guy that has not played shortstop. If it's, I mean, Mauricio's not going to be healthy come opening day, so I would say he's out of the question there. Jet Williams at least can play shortstop, but and he brings short to another meaning of shortstop. But either way, um, yeah, I do worry about not having like a bona fide backup shortstop. Not that it's a big deal because Lindor, knock on wood, heavy here, has shown to be someone that goes out there to play as much as possible. But heaven forbid that happens, or if you just want to get him off his feet for a day, let's just say that. Even I do worry about not having another shortstop on the roster.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that. And I think, we brought it up before in the last podcast. It was one of the reasons why we were more in favor of bringing back Iglesias, just because, he can play shortstop. And I mean, like we brought up before with Acuna, he can play shortstop, but it's one of those factors again of, do you want to bring up Acuna just to sit on the bench and be a part-time player? Or, do you want to go down to AAA again and continue his development and, play a lot more, play more of the field, see a lot more pitches, and just overall just keep on his development. I mean, it's a tough decision, but again, it's one that Stearns gonna have to make. And I mean, whichever decision he makes, I'm gonna trust him on it. But I think probably right now, with Madrigal being out, like the guy that I think I would lean towards, and not my personal decision, but I think the guy that they're gonna lean on towards to get that last bench spot, I think it's gonna be Beatty. I think it will be just because he's had multiple stints up here. I think, and I think for Beatty, it's gonna be pretty much his last shot to really cement the spot here in New York. Because if he comes up here again and he makes the opening day rush and he struggles, I think at that point the Mets are gonna have to ship him out. And he's not gonna have a ton of value at that point. But I think for him it's do or die time now here in New York. And listen, if he comes up here and he performs, great. It's another bench option. It's another, option. If anytime like Pete needs to DH, you can move Vientos over to first base and play Beatty at third base, or if he doesn't make it here, you ship him out and he'll go somewhere else, and maybe some other team could find a place for him, and he could be a reclamation project somewhere. But yeah, the shortstop though thing, the factor of especially with Lindor, we hope that you know the back injury doesn't pamper him pretty much throughout this season and then the rest of his career. Because I mean, he did bring up, especially I think it was a couple days ago, that even during the postseason, like he was able to play through it, but he definitely did feel some back pain. So, and he even brought up a couple days ago too that he doesn't want to take a lot of off days. He wants to be out there and he wants to continue to play. But I mean, for him, he's way too valuable, and I want him to be out there. But I also don't want to. I don't want him to run himself into the ground just because he wants to be out there every day. If he needs some rest days, then you got to give him some rest days. And even like he doesn't have to sit on the bench, but again, that's why you have the DH in the National League now. You could rotate the DH positions. So yeah, I think for me, like I said, I think Beatty's in prime position right now to get that last bench spot.
The only the only problem that I'm just having with one of these younger guys getting the last bench spots is you know, where's the playing time coming for these guys? Especially a guy I mean, if they're gonna sit Jeff McNeil to play Brett Beatty, then I'm cool with that. As much as I'm not 100% a believer in Brett Beatty, I just cannot stand Jeff McNeil even more. So I would, I guess, rather see Brett Beatty at that point. But if they're gonna have Brett Beatty on the roster just to sit on the bench behind Jeff McNeil, I'd rather him just play in AAA at that point because I'd rather. We talk about this all the time with the Rangers. There's no such bad thing as over marinating your prospects versus, you know, having them raw on the bench. We've seen it time and time again with them, believe me. So I just don't want the Mets to make that same mistake where they're going to have a guy up here and then he's just going to sit on the bench because outside of that, where's the playing time coming? Because he's not going to be able to DH. Well, I mean, he could technically, but he's most likely not going to DH. You're not going to platoon him with Vientos because then Vientos isn't getting any playing time. Jeff McNeil, again, is he going to sit? I don't know. So where is he getting reps is my problem. And this is where I agree with Brian. Like, if any of these guys won't be starters, then play them in AAA to start the season because you're just, you're having them rot on the bench.
Now that we're thinking about it and now that we're talking about it more, Jeff McNeil really fucks us up.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff McNeil really fucks up the roster construction and the money and the money allocation, because if Jeff McNeil wasn't here, like we brought up on the last podcast, Jose Iglesias would be back right now, and I think that what's it called? I think one of the younger guys like Acuna would be in line right now to start second base, because I think Iglesias, while he did play well, he did play really well last year, I think he'd be more than okay than with being a backup, because he'll still get plenty of playing time. Acuna will need some rest days. He could go in at second base. Lindor, like we mentioned, if he needs a couple days, Iglesias can go right there and play at shortstop. And even like we saw last year, if Vientos needs a break, Iglesias can play third base also. So that's one of the big positives with Iglesias, just because he was so versatile in that infield.
Hey, Jeff McNeil is versatile too.
I'm sorry. I know he could play the outfield. My bad. But yeah, now I really understand why Carson just doesn't like him.
Oh, I've understood. I mean, it's just like forget just that too. I mean, even if his money was off the books in this
I
scenario
know.
too, it's just like maybe instead of Montas, they have the McNeil money and the money that they paid to Montas. Maybe they could have got a more bona fide starting pitcher, but we'll never know now. It's fine. Thanks, Chef McNeil. But yeah,
Yeah, Epler
and
was the one who extended
yeah,
him to
it
Dyer.
was, of course, the great Billy
Epbar.
Epler. Instead of extending literally anyone else, Ep Dog goes ahead and spends money on the great Jeff McNeil, who would have been a free agent this past season, I believe, or this off season, I should say. Which that would have been nice because we would have been frolicking through the fields with Carson together over him leaving. But either way, yeah, it really puts a damper on where the Mets could go with this roster because you're in this awkward spot where one of these young guys is probably going to rot on the bench. And it sucks because what other choice do you have? Like, at least with Nick Madrigal, it was a little bit of a safety net where, you know, you could at least you could have him on the major league roster come opening day, and he could have been like the Zach Short of this year or the Joey Wendell of this year, where he's here for a bit, and then once one of those prospects down in AAA really, prove themselves to earn that spot, then they come up because I'd rather them go through spring training and then go through AAA a little bit, like the first month of AAA, and then call one of these guys up versus, again, having them sit on the bench where when you do use them the few times, it's not going to be as good. The only way this could work is you know, if you're going with a scenario where Brett Beatty and Jeff McNeil are literally just switching every other day playing, which even then that might be, I don't know if that's good for anyone. So it just McNeil and Marte. McNeil and Marte.
$35 million wrapped up between those two. Damn.
Yep.
What's Gavin Cicchini or TJ Rivera doing these days? Maybe they want the final spot.
Honestly, yeah, at this point. I mean, they just that's where I just sit here and it's like I'd like for them to just bring Iglesias back just because I like forget just even about his name being Jose Iglesias. Like he could be he could be Mike Smith for all I care. And I would want him back. I would want him because this team, I'd feel more comfortable with a veteran infielder off the bench right now. I just would. And again, Brett Beatty, he's doing great so far in spring, but if Jeff McNeil's going to be playing every day, then what does it matter? So we'll see how that goes. Or maybe Jeff McNeil is that super utility man off the bench. And, then I'm overthinking this whole thing. We're overthinking this whole thing for nothing. But either way, we'll segue into a little bit more of the pitching discussion since I didn't really bring up and we didn't do a deep dive in the fact that the Mets signed Jose Urena today on I believe it's a split contract that they signed him to, where, he'd be making, I think, $2 million in the major leagues, be making obviously the minimum or less than that in the minor league, $700K, whatever it was. More pitching depth. He could be a guy that he's late spring, which hurts him, but he could be a guy that you see get starts earlier in the year. This is your Julio Tehran of this year, I will say. But I do think there's a little bit more, I don't want to call it upside, but flexibility with Jose Urena because he did thrive actually out of the bullpen last year at Texas, but he did make a couple of starts for them. Pitched to a 3.80 ERA, a 4.62 FIP, a .1 WAR, Ks per nine of 5.7, walks per nine of 3.2, and a home runs per nine of 1.07. Again, ideally, you don't want him starting, but if you need him to eat innings, he'll at least do that. So that's really all I got as the positives there. There's really nothing else to unpack with that. But what were your thoughts on the signing?
Yeah, I mean, I like it as a depth move. I think, like you mentioned, he could either come out of the bullpen or he could either start and be a spot starting eat innings. You always do need guys like that. at the end of the day, it's a long season. It's 162 games, and there's going to be injuries. There's going to be guys that need a rest. So it's always good to have a lot of good quality arms out there. But I mean, yeah, you look at the pitch types: four pitch pitcher, sinker, slider, changeups, four seamer, and then looking more in depth at the pitches. I mean, his two really main pitches that he had a lot of success on were the slider and the changeup. Slider 242 batting average, 211 expecting batting average. Changeup 200 batting average and expected 225 batting average. The sinker was not great, 271 batting average, expected of 290. His four seamer though got lit up, 400 batting average and a 474 expecting batting average. So I think there might have to be a little change to that fastball. Maybe he throws it less, or possibly, he goes into the pitching lab and they're able to convert into a cutter. But I mean, yeah, if he's more relying on the slider and changeup, then I think we'll see a lot of better results. And yeah, like I said, for me, it's a nice little depth pickup.
Yeah. So again, let's say Julio Tehran of this year. We're not going to spend too much time going in depth, but in terms of what we will go more in depth with is how good the pitching has been so far this spring, which I want to spend most of the time giving the flowers to Clay Holmes, who has been really good so far this spring, which, who would have thought though? Who would have thought? We were saying it so far. We've said it before. The only thing that I still have remaining in question is how is he going to look once the pitch count starts going up and once he's seeing guys more throughout the batting order, which we'll see. But so far, I mean, that kick changeup looks really good. The slider, the sweeper, and the crazy part is in the outing today that he pitched, the sinker was graded as one of his lesser pitches today, which usually that's his go-to pitch and that's his main pitch. So if his sinker wasn't really looking the best, that's a good sign because that more times than not that pitch is going to be on. But in terms of the sweeper and that kick changeup, especially, I'd like to see him be a little bit better with the four seam to help him tunnel his pitches a little bit better. But either way, I'm loving what I'm seeing so far from Clay Holmes, and this looks like there might be more of a ceiling than we initially thought. But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, and because the game today at least it wasn't televised. I don't know why, because it was in Port St. Lucie. I don't know why they didn't televise it on SNY, but at least the game tomorrow is going to be televised. But I mean, yeah, I mean when I was watching his first start against the Astros, I really liked his fastball in that first start. He was really 96, 97. He did top out at 98, I believe. So that's nice to see that he's got some velo behind that fastball. But yeah, I thought the sinker looked good. I thought, he got a lot of swings and misses on that kick changeup, like you mentioned. And for me, I really like his sweeper. And at least for me, we mentioned on here before that his sweeper is one of his main pitches alongside with the sinker. But I thought he was doing a really good job with that sweeper and really working both sides of the plate. Both getting, right-handed hitters to chase on the left side, and then even tying up guys on the inside part of the plate. He's looked really good so far. I mean, like I said, he's pitched 6 innings so far. He's given up 1 hit. It was a double hit to Christian Walker, 0 walks, 0 earned runs. I mean, for me, and like we mentioned before, he's not facing the top guys right now. So we'll have to see, once the season, starts up, and even once we get later into spring training, when more of the top guys start playing more consistently, then we'll see how he really does. But at least right now, for right now, and then also, I forgot to mention, but he's kind of added a little bit of a cutter too to his pitch mix, so that's nice to see also. But yeah, for me, I think Clay Holmes looked really good so far.
Yeah, a lot of positives there so far, and we both were saying it. We were a little sour when it first happened, but it definitely grew on both of us more as the off season went along. And speaking of, a move that grew on us rather quickly during the off season was Griffin Canning, who did pitch today. Did look pretty solid for the most part, which I believe during the off season we discussed the fact that he needed to add a cutter. I could be wrong there, but he had a cutter. That's all I know is that he had a new cutter today. and he looked pretty good in today's outing. We'll see how things progress with them. I'm still a little hesitant on how I'm going to feel with Griffin Canning, but I think that, in the swingman role that we described, I think still, maybe this could work out for him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think for me with Canning, like obviously I think he's throwing the fastball a little bit less. He's implemented the cutter into his repertoire. I think for me, like we mentioned, still not completely sold on Griffin Canning. We do certainly trust Stearns, and we'll see how we works. Whether he's going to be a majority of in the bullpen or a swing guy, or maybe he gets a starting spot right now at least for the start of the season because guys like Manaea and Montas are out. But I think for me with Canning, like if Canning just comes in here and he's able to just eat up innings and he pitches anywhere from like a 4 to a 4.5 ERA, like I'll take that. Like I don't need anything special from Griffin Canning, but if he gives me those type of numbers and he's able to just to eat innings and then get the game along, to where he keeps it close where the offense can expect explode at one point, or get it to a certain point, after 5 innings where you can hand it off the bullpen. I think for me that's all I'm really asking for out of Griffin Canning.
I was very happy to see that he didn't utilize the four seam as much in terms of today's pitching report, because that was something that we talked about as well, that he needed to stop utilizing the four seam as much. And, that helped out. And the cutter graded out very well today. So, again, we'll see how it goes with them, which is why I think maybe he'll be better in that swingman type role. But that remains to be seen. The guy, though, that I'm very excited to talk about is who Brian mentioned in the chat, Max Kranick, who I'm gonna drink the Kool-Aid. I'm believing in Max Kranick. And will he be in the bullpen or a starter? I don't know. I think that he's a guy that could be a swingman too, which again isn't a bad thing to have a lot of these guys. But he has been unbelievable this spring. I mean, all of his pitches are grading out fairly well. The stuff just looks so good from him, and his fastball is his four seam is just disgusting. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Kranick, but I'm believing in him. And it's interesting too because people were saying late last season in AAA he was showing a lot of this type of promise. So it's good to see as well that he's carrying this over. You're muted.
My bad. No, this is a guy in Kranick where I mean the Mets brought him in last offseason, and I think in spring training he got hurt. I forgot what type of injury that he did sustain last year in spring training, but he didn't really pitch a bunch last season. But yeah, I mean, so far in spring training, his small sample size, I thought he's looked really good. I mean, if I recall back to his first start, I thought his fastball looked really well. I thought his sweeper looked well. The only thing though that I thought that he, at least in that first outing, that I really didn't like, I thought he hung his slider a little bit too much, and guys were kind of driving that pitch deep into the outfield a little bit. But towards the end of the outing, he kind of got it a little bit under control. But I mean, even today, I mean, like I said, the game was on TV, but you look at his pitching card today. I mean, the four seamer graded out well, a 115 pro stuff plus, the slider a 121 pro stuff plus, and the sweeper with a 115 pro stuff plus. I mean, if Kranick is going to come in here and he could be a nice bullpen option, and again, we talk about why a lot of these other teams are successful and why they have constant, success throughout the years, like, look at the Braves and the Dodgers and the Tampa Bay Rays and organizations like that. It's because they find these guys and they're able to just keep producing these under the radar arms. Like what Max Kranick is right now, if he continues it on. But and I think last year, we even brought it up, about how many times, last year guys were being run into the ground, whether it was Deadnell Nunez, whether it was Reed Garrett, whether it was a bunch of other guys. You want to have a lot of options in that bullpen and a lot of depth in that bullpen. So just in case if one guy does get overused, or if they got to send somebody down, or if there's an injury, that you could call one of these guys up and you could be like, okay, I trust this guy to come up here and at least do a solid job. So I would say if Kranick keeps doing what he's doing, I would not be surprised if he cracks a bullpen spot on the opening day roster.
Yeah. He's definitely getting to a point where if he keeps this up, he's definitely going to be in serious consideration to make the opening day roster, which I would be very happy if that's the case because he's looked really good so far. And I honestly think that he's been I would say early on, he's been the biggest surprise for me in spring training. But that's just me at least because Brett Beatty does this gimmick every year, so it's not really a surprise. Everything else, is kind of going more as expected there. But Krannick's been the one guy that has really stood out to me. The other guy that I'm very interested in to see how things go with him is Tyler Zuber, who could be an option for this bullpen. Uh, Again, he pitched today, he had a hit against him, got a strikeout. I don't think that there was any good data on him. I'd have to find out, but he's another arm that definitely does intrigue me in terms of, guys that could be in this bullpen. But yeah, overall, do you have any more thoughts with the pitching depth at all?
Nah, we can move on.
Well, I don't really have anything else to discuss here. I'm trying to see if there's anything that I missed right now because usually after I stream, there's always something that I realize that I missed. So I'm just trying to think about what I could have. I think we covered everything though for the most part. Yeah, unless
Yeah,
you had anything you wanted to
there's
add.
really nothing else unless we want to talk about Juan Soto homering his first at bat as a Met in spring training, but and the amount of aura he unleashed. But yeah, other than that, there's not really anything else to talk about.
I mean, yeah, that I discussed in the opening. That really overshadowed Clay Holmes' first start, but I can't wait for the next 15
I
years with Soto.
mean, we're we're 1 month away from opening day. So at this time next month, opening day in Houston, and probably at this point right now, I'd envision Kodai Senga's getting the ball for opening day, but yeah, we're counting down the days right now.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Jose Siri had a home
Yeah,
run too.
yeah. Can't forget about Aura Man either.
Can't forget about Siri. And yeah, I think that's really all we have to discuss. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Leave a like on your way out. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.